What would you do if the very people you raised, the ones who should protect and love you, turned into your worst enemies the moment they thought they struck gold? Imagine being told by your own son to just go die somewhere else after winning $53 million, only for him to realize seconds later that the golden ticket never had his name on it. This is not a fairy tale, and it is not a fantasy. It is a chilling story of betrayal, greed, and a mother's ultimate revenge. Tonight, you will witness how justice can take decades to arrive, but when it does, it arrives like a storm no one can escape. Stay with me, because what you are about to hear will shake your faith in family, loyalty, and love itself. Subscribe now to Silent Lies so you never miss the truth behind the masks people wear. The morning that set everything in motion was as gray and cold as any December day in Iowa, the kind of morning where the frost bites at your lungs and the sky feels like a heavy lid pressing down on the town. I wrapped my scarf tighter and made my way to Murphy's Corner store, as I had done every Friday for 32 years. The routine was so embedded in me that it felt like muscle memory. Step inside, nod at the bell jingling over the door, exchange a smile with Jimmy Murphy, and hand over my $5 bill. He would print my ticket with the same numbers that had become my mantra: 7, 14, 23, 31, 45, and Powerball 18. To anyone else, they were just random digits, but to me, they were chapters of my life. 7 was for the day Harold slipped a wedding band on my trembling hand. 14 was for the day Marcus was born, when I thought my love for him would eclipse every hardship life could throw at me. 23 for our anniversary. 31 for the house number where we raised our children. 45 for the years Harold and I stood together against the world. 18 was for Marcus's graduation, when he looked so full of promise that I thought my chest might burst with pride. Each number was a memory, a scar, a keepsake carved into paper week after week, year after year. Jimmy always told me I was due for a win. I would laugh it off, clutching my ticket as though it was a fragile relic, never daring to imagine what a win would look like. That morning, though, his words clung to me like frost on my coat. Maybe it was the way he said it, or maybe it was because I was so tired of being treated like a shadow in my own son's home. "Cross your fingers for me, Jimmy," I said, slipping the ticket into my purse beside Harold's old driver's license, the one I could never bring myself to throw away. He grinned, and for a moment I allowed myself to believe he was right. On the walk back, my boots crunched against the icy pavement. I passed the house Harold and I had painted every summer until our arms ached. White with black shutters, dignified, he used to say, like a house that had earned the right to be respected. The new owners had painted it yellow, a bright, almost mocking shade. Harold would have hated it. I stared at it longer than I meant to, then forced myself to keep walking, because now I lived not in the house where I had built my life, but in the house of my son, where I was tolerated more than welcomed. Ashley's silver BMW was parked in the driveway like a trophy. Through the window I saw her pacing, her voice sharp on the phone. I did not need to guess who she was talking to. Probably her sister, probably planning another vacation I would never be invited on, all while reminding Marcus of how much of a burden it was to keep me under their roof. When I opened the back door, the smell of disinfectant and expensive candles greeted me. I hung my coat on the same hook Marcus once used for his Little League jersey. Harold used to hang his work shirts there, worn but clean, smelling faintly of motor oil and soap. Now it was just a hook in a house where I was no longer allowed to be sentimental. "Dot, is that you?" Ashley's voice floated from the kitchen, carrying that thin edge of irritation that had become her constant companion. "Just me," I replied, biting back the words I really wanted to say. "Sorry for existing in your perfect palace." I kept my tone neutral, because survival had taught me silence was often my only weapon. Harold's death had unstitched the fabric of my life. At his funeral, Marcus stood at the podium and spoke of his father's strength and devotion, and Ashley dabbed her eyes with a tissue that never caught a real tear. They told me the big house was too much for me, that it was dangerous for a widow to live alone. At first, their concern had sounded genuine, and in my grief I almost believed it. But concern became strategy, and strategy became control. Before I knew it, I had exchanged my home for a guest room painted pale yellow, with Ashley fluffing pillows as if she were doing me a kindness. The first weeks were bearable. I cooked, I cleaned, I kept my head down. But slowly their kindness transformed into commands. Could I babysit? Could I pick up the dry cleaning? Could I cover utilities since I was part of the household? Soon, my entire Social Security check was swallowed up by what Ashley labeled household expenses, leaving me with $50 of so-called freedom. My name on their lips shifted from Mom to Dot. Spoken like I was staff, they were too polite to fire. At night I would sit in the guest room, staring at the walls, listening to the sounds of their lives unfolding without me downstairs. They took vacations, threw parties, laughed with friends, while I scrubbed their dishes and folded their laundry. It was during one of Ashley's dinner parties that I overheard her gloating to a friend. "It is like having Liv in help, except she pays us for the privilege." That was when something hardened inside me. That was when I realized I had been demoted from mother to employee, from family to financial resource. But I said nothing. I swallowed the humiliation, clung to my ritual of buying that lottery ticket every Friday, whispering silent prayers that maybe, just maybe, life would give me one final card to play. Winter had come again, and with it, Ashley's grand announcement. They were going to remodel the basement into a suite for me. She said it with the brightness of someone bestowing a gift, laying out blueprints like it was a dream come true. Privacy, she called it. Independence. What she meant was isolation. What she meant was confinement. The basement was not a gift. It was a burial. I nodded as though considering it, but inside I felt the embers of something I had not felt in years' defiance. My world had been narrowed to the size of a guest room, but I still had my numbers: 7, 14, 23, 31, 45, 18. Memories carved into destiny. The kind of destiny that waits quietly for the right storm to break. I climbed the stairs that night and sat by the window, watching snow fall across the streetlight glow. In my purse, the ticket lay silent. But I knew deep in the marrow of my bones that sometimes justice takes its time, and when it finally arrives, it does not knock politely. It kicks the door down. When Harold passed away, my world shifted in ways I was not prepared to confront. The grief came in waves that left me disoriented, stumbling through days that blurred into one another. At the funeral, Marcus stood up in his dark suit and spoke with a son's pride about his father's dedication, his years of hard work, his steady love. Ashley sat beside him, a tissue pressed neatly to her eye, her posture perfect. But I watched her closely, and I knew the tears she pretended to wipe were as hollow as her comfort. On the drive home from the cemetery, I sat in the back seat, staring out at frozen fields, remembering when Harold and I used to drive those same roads holding hands, dreaming of the future. Practicality had never been part of those dreams, but Marcus and Ashley spoke of it now as if practicality were compassion. "You should not be in that big house alone, Mom," Marcus said, his voice soft but rehearsed. "It is not safe. It is not practical." Ashley leaned forward from the passenger seat, her words smooth and coated with concern. "At your age, Dot, what if you fall? What if no one finds you for days?" Her voice was steady, but there was calculation beneath it. They convinced me to move into their home, and at first, I told myself it was temporary. The guest room looked pleasant enough with its pale walls and neat bed. Ashley fluffed the pillows like a hotel maid showing off amenities. "You will have your own space," she said, smiling. But her smile never reached her eyes. In those first weeks, I cooked meals that everyone enjoyed, cleaned the house until it sparkled, and watched the grandchildren with real joy. Marcus thanked me then, even hugged me occasionally, and I wanted to believe this arrangement was born of love. But slowly, the tone shifted. Gratitude became expectation. "Dot, could you watch the kids this weekend?" "Dot, could you pick up the dry cleaning?" "Dot, the cable guy is coming. We need you here." Each request framed as convenience, each convenience solidifying into duty. By the second month, I realized I had become less a guest and more a worker. By the third, I was the backbone of their household, unpaid and unthanked. Then came Ashley's so-called financial arrangement. One morning, she spread documents across the kitchen table as though she were chairing a board meeting, her nails tapped against a highlighted column. Rent for the guest room, utilities, food, household maintenance. A total of $1,300, conveniently almost identical to my monthly Social Security check. She smiled as though it were reasonable, even generous. I signed because what else could I do? At my age, finding a place of my own on $50 spare a month was a fantasy. The grandchildren, Emma and Jake, were my one light in that house. When they visited, I poured my love into them. We built forts, baked cookies, laughed until our sides hurt. But even that joy was weaponized against me. "You being here increases our costs," Ashley complained, as though the children's giggles consumed electricity by the hour. I bit my tongue because to protest was to risk my place. By summer, the mask slipped completely. Ashley's requests became orders. Marcus perfected the art of absence, and I was left holding the weight of the household. One evening during a party, I served wine and snacks like a servant while their guests laughed in the living room. I overheard Ashley tell her friend, "It is perfect. Dot does everything. She even pays for the privilege. It is like monetizing your mother-in-law." Laughter followed. I stood in the kitchen clutching a tray, my face burning, my chest hollow. That was the night I knew the truth. I was not family in that house. I was leverage. But silence had become my armor. I went upstairs to the guest room, shut the door, and told myself that sometimes the universe takes its time. Justice is patient, but it does not forget. November brought the breaking point. Ashley announced with bright enthusiasm that they would convert the basement into a suite for me. She spread blueprints across the dining table, her voice gleaming with the kind of joy only cruelty can inspire. Privacy, she called it. Independence. What she meant was containment. She wanted me underground, removed from the spaces that reminded them I was still part of their lives. Marcus stood awkwardly nearby, nodding as though he agreed. "What if I do not want to move to the basement?" I asked, my voice low, steady. Ashley's smile thinned, her eyes flashing. "Well, Dot, we have been feeling like we need our space back." The words hung between us like a sentence already passed. My son shifted, cleared his throat, and murmured that if I wanted to explore other options, they would understand. Other options? As if I had any. I felt the walls of their house closing in, the air turning stale, the life I had built collapsing into a corner of someone else's home. Yet every Friday, I walked to Murphy's store. My boots cracked through the snow, my breath fogged in the air, and I handed over $5 like a ritual offering. The numbers printed on that slip of paper were no longer just memories, they were promises. Promises that one day, something would shift. Jimmy looked at me with his boyish smile. "Maybe this is your week, Mrs. Williams." I tucked the ticket away with Harold's license, my fingers trembling slightly. Maybe he was right. Maybe justice was not blind, only biding its time. At night I would sit by the window watching the snow fall, imagining Harold's voice telling me to stand tall. My room, once tolerable, now felt like a cage. Downstairs, Ashley argued with contractors about how cheap they could make my basement prison. "It is just for one elderly person," she said, her tone clipped and dismissive. Just one elderly person. That was what I had become in my son's house. Not Dorothy, who had built a family, endured hardship, and held them all together for decades. Just one elderly person to be managed efficiently. But in my purse, my numbers slept. 7, 14, 23, 31, 45, 18. My memories, my faith, my weapon. I whispered to myself that when justice finally came, it would not creep quietly, it would roar. And no one, not Ashley with her smug smile, not Marcus with his convenient silences, would be able to ignore it. The storm that changed everything did not come from the sky, but from 6 small numbers printed in black ink. December had brought an early blizzard, snow pressing against the windows and wind howling like a warning, but I was not afraid of the storm outside. My real storm was brewing in silence, tucked neatly inside my purse. That Friday, I trudged through the icy streets to Murphy's corner store, with the determination of someone who had nothing left to lose. Jimmy was behind the counter, cheerful as always, though the gray weather dulled even his youthful grin. "Rough day for walking," he said. I pulled the $5 bill from my worn wallet. "I have walked through worse." He printed my ticket, and the familiar numbers appeared again, almost sacred in their rhythm. 7, 14, 23, 31, 45, 18. As he handed it to me, I thought about how those numbers had been markers of my past, carved from love, loss, and memory. But something inside me shifted. Maybe now they were not just memories. Maybe they were prophecy. I slipped the ticket behind Harold's driver's license, the one I still carried, as if he were guiding me through the years. Snowflakes stung my face as I walked home, and I passed the elementary school where children laughed on sleds, their joy bright against the bleak winter. For a fleeting moment, I remembered Marcus at that age, red-cheeked and alive, building snow forts until his hands were too cold to move. Where had that boy gone? When had he become a man who could look at his mother and suggest she live in the basement like an afterthought? Back at the house, I heard Ashley's clipped voice on the phone with a contractor. "Cheapest options," she was saying. "It does not need to be fancy. It is just for one elderly person." I froze in the doorway, her words striking harder than the cold outside. Just for one elderly person, not Dorothy, not the woman who had carried Marcus into the world, built a home with Harold, endured decades of sacrifice. I was nothing more than an inconvenience, a problem to be managed efficiently. That night, while the storm rattled the windows, I sat upstairs with my ticket. My hands shook as I turned on the television at 10:59 p.m. The news anchor smiled too brightly, announcing numbers that fell like thunder. 7, 14, 23, 31, 45, Powerball 18. My numbers. Exactly my numbers. For a heartbeat, my brain refused to accept it. 32 years of ritual and quiet hope had led to this moment. I scrambled for my purse, pulled the ticket out with trembling fingers, and compared. Perfect. Every number perfect. $53 million. I pressed my hand to my mouth, muffling the sob that broke free. Not a sob of grief, but of disbelief, of power suddenly placed in the hands of someone who had been powerless too long. My first instinct was to rush downstairs, to shout the news to Marcus and Ashley, to imagine us celebrating as a family. But then I remembered. The rent I had been forced to pay, the insults whispered when they thought I was not listening, the plans to bury me in their basement. Why should I share this miracle with them? Instead, I tucked the ticket back into my wallet and turned off the television. I lay awake for hours staring at the ceiling, Harold's voice echoing in my head. Do not let anyone take advantage of your kindness. He had been right. I had been blind, but no longer. By dawn, I had begun to form a plan. Saturday morning unfolded like any other. Emma and Jake bickered over the television. Marcus buried himself in emails, Ashley fluttered around in yoga clothes, preparing to vanish to the salon. She asked me, as always, to watch the children. I agreed, as always, masking the fire inside me. But fate was not willing to wait. While tidying the kitchen, Ashley rummaged through my purse, searching for coupons I had clipped. Her voice rang out, sharp and startled. "Dot, what is this?" I turned and saw her holding my ticket, her face drained of color. She stammered, then pulled out her phone, frantically searching last night's numbers. Marcus came running at her screams. "The lottery! Look at this! We won!" The room became chaos. Ashley spun in circles, shrieking with joy, calling relatives, boasting that we were millionaires. Marcus examined the ticket like a scientist, repeating, "This is real. This is actually real." Emma asked if we were rich now, and Ashley scooped her up, promising a life without worry. I sat quietly at the table, watching the performance, knowing they had built their fantasy on a lie. They were planning my future, already upgrading the basement, talking about retirement communities for me, as if my existence were a puzzle to be solved with money. Their voices buzzed around me until I could not bear it. "There is just one detail," I said softly. Silence fell like ice. They turned, expectant. I reached out my hand. After a pause, Marcus reluctantly gave me the ticket. I looked at it, then at them. "This ticket is in my name. I bought it. It is mine." The words sank in slowly, reshaping their faces into masks of horror. Ashley sputtered about family, about sharing, about how the money would change everything for us. But I felt stronger than I had in years. "No," I said, standing, my voice steady. "It changes everything for me." The refrigerator hummed. Emma whispered to Jake, and my son and his wife stood frozen, their golden dream dissolving before their eyes. They had treated me like a burden, like cheap labor, like nothing more than an elderly woman to be managed. But now I held the power, and it was worth far more than 53 million. It was dignity. It was freedom. It was justice, long delayed, finally delivered. The silence after I claimed the ticket as mine was heavier than any storm. Ashley's painted smile cracked as she tried to regain control. Her voice softened into that tone she used when convincing Marcus to buy things they could not afford. "Dot, honey, we are family. Of course the ticket is technically yours, but this win changes everything for all of us. We can finally have the life we dreamed of." Her eyes gleamed, not with love but with calculation. I slipped the ticket back into my wallet with deliberate calm. "No, Ashley, it changes everything for me." The room dropped into stillness so deep that even the children stopped their chatter. I saw the panic in Marcus's eyes, the wheels turning as he realized the life he imagined was slipping out of reach. The next hours were chaos disguised as celebration. Ashley called friends, her sister, even the local news station. She declared we had won. her voice trembling with excitement as she painted herself the star of someone else's miracle. Marcus paced the kitchen, muttering about lawyers, accountants, taxes, 1,000 details he barely understood but suddenly claimed as his responsibility. Emma twirled in circles, singing about castles and ponies, while Jake asked if being rich meant they never had to eat broccoli again. I sat quietly drinking my coffee, observing it all as though watching a play where every actor had forgotten the script. They saw themselves as victors. I saw them as desperate gamblers holding onto chips that were not theirs. When the excitement dimmed, Ashley's scheming began in earnest. "The basement plan is outdated now," she announced, her voice bright. "With this money, we can buy a bigger house. One with a separate wing for you, Dot. Or perhaps—" her face lit up as the thought took shape. "One of those luxury senior communities. You would love it there. Activities, medical care, people your age. We could settle you somewhere perfect." I almost laughed. They were already planning to spend money they did not have to erase me from their lives more elegantly. Marcus nodded quickly, eager to show he agreed with his wife. "That would be great for you, Mom. You would have friends, security, and we could visit." His tone carried the false warmth of someone selling a product. I leaned back, watching them with a calm that unsettled even me. "Interesting plans," I said, "but there is one problem. None of this money belongs to you. The ticket is mine, and I will decide what to do with it." The words hit them like cold water. Ashley's face drained, then flushed crimson. She leaned forward, her businesslike tone sharp. "Dot, do not be rash. You are not equipped to manage this kind of fortune. It requires strategy, expertise, family guidance." "Family guidance," I repeated, savoring the irony. For 2 years they had drained my savings, forced me to pay rent for the privilege of cooking their meals, cleaning their home, and raising their children. Now they claimed I was too weak to handle my own money. Ashley pressed on, her desperation showing. "Most lottery winners go bankrupt within 5 years. Without proper management, you will lose everything. You need us. You need our help." Marcus stepped closer, his hands raised as if approaching a frightened animal. "Mom, please, let us think this through together. This is life-changing, and it is too complicated for one person." I looked at my son and wondered when I had lost him. When had the boy who once clung to my hand in snow become a man who saw me only as a bank account? His eyes searched mine for weakness, for submission. Instead, I gave him steel. "You are right. It is complicated. But I have been managing life for 67 years without your permission. I will manage this too." Ashley's carefully constructed mask cracked. Her voice shook with urgency. "You would not abandon us. Not after everything we have done for you." I stood slowly, my back straight, my voice strong. "Everything you have done for me? Charging me rent that consumed my social security check, treating me like hired help, planning to bury me in your basement. If that is family, I want no part of it." The silence that followed was suffocating. The hum of the refrigerator filled the room. Emma tugged at Marcus's sleeve, whispering that she was hungry. He shushed her, his eyes fixed on me, his world collapsing. That night, Ashley returned armed with research. She slid a binder across the table, filled with statistics and warnings about ruined lottery winners. 70% end up bankrupt, she said, her tone sharp with false authority. "You cannot do this alone." I sipped my coffee slowly. "Then it is good I will not be alone. I will have professionals, not opportunists." The words stung. Ashley's lips thinned. Marcus's shoulders sagged. For once, neither of them had a rebuttal. They were running out of angles and they knew it. In the days that followed, the truth began to spread. Reporters gathered outside the house, eager for a glimpse of the town's newest millionaire. Ashley rushed to the door with her perfect hair and radiant smile, pretending she was the lucky one, giving sound bites about how our lives had changed forever. But I refused to play her game. When I finally stepped outside, microphones thrust toward me, I spoke the truth. I told the reporters how I had lived, how I had paid rent to my own son and his wife, how I had been reduced to unpaid labor while they plotted to hide me in the basement. Their cameras captured Ashley's face paling in the doorway, Marcus frozen beside her. The story spread like wildfire, and I let it burn. Because this was no longer about survival. It was about reclaiming my voice. The money was power, but more than that, it was justice. And justice, when it finally arrives, does not whisper, it roars. By Monday morning, the entire town of Cedar Falls buzzed with my name. Word had spread fast, faster than the snow melting on sidewalks. Jimmy Murphy had put two and two together the second the winning numbers were announced, and by noon, news vans blocked Marcus and Ashley's driveway. Reporters leaned over the hedge, cameras rolling, waiting to capture the face of the mysterious woman who had finally beaten the odds. Ashley, always quick to seize the spotlight, opened the door with her brightest smile. Her hair was styled, her makeup flawless, her tone sugary sweet. Mrs. Williams is resting right now, but as her family, we are thrilled for this blessing in all our lives. She loved saying that. All our lives, as if my ticket had been a joint venture. As if my money now belonged to her too. Inside the house, phones rang non-stop. Old friends from church called to congratulate me. Former colleagues from the insurance office wanted to reconnect. Even cousins I had not spoken to in years suddenly remembered my number. Each voice carried excitement, but beneath it, curiosity. What would I do with $53 million? I already knew my first step. At 2 o'clock that afternoon, I had an appointment with David Richardson, the lawyer Harold and I had trusted for decades. He had guided us through wills, estates, insurance policies, the quiet structures of a life built carefully over time. David was a man who understood not just the law, but people. He was steady, wise, and most importantly, loyal. When I arrived at his office, he rose from behind his desk with a warm smile. "Dorothy, congratulations. Harold would be so proud." His words filled me with a bittersweet ache. For a moment, I imagined Harold sitting beside me, his hand resting on mine, his eyes sparkling with the quiet pride he always carried when he thought I wasn't looking. David's congratulations soon shifted to business. He advised me to take the annuity for tax reasons, to establish trusts, to consider philanthropy if I wished. He spoke plainly, never once implying that the decisions were too complex for me. It was a relief to be treated as capable after 2 years of being diminished by my own family. But then his tone grew serious. "Dorothy, there is something you need to know. Something Harold asked me to share only under certain circumstances." My breath caught. What circumstances? If your family ever tried to take advantage of you financially. The world tilted as David opened a thick folder. Harold had suspected Marcus and Ashley's motives long before I had seen them clearly. 6 months before his death, he had hired a private investigator. The documents revealed debts piled high, credit cards maxed out, car loans, a mortgage underwater. They had been living on borrowed money, always one step from collapse. And then came the final revelation. Harold had taken out a $500,000 insurance policy, placed in a trust in my name, untouched until I needed it. My throat tightened as I realized what he had done. Even in death, Harold had been protecting me. He had seen what I had refused to see. He had prepared for a day when Marcus and Ashley would try to use me. I left David's office with more than legal advice. I left with proof. Proof that my husband had not abandoned me. Proof that my son and his wife were drowning in lies and debt. Proof that the years I spent doubting myself had been wasted on people who never deserved my trust. That evening, I returned home with my purse heavier, not from money, but from the weight of truth. Marcus and Ashley thought we would be meeting to discuss media attention, to smooth over what they saw as my emotional outburst with reporters. They had no idea that the reckoning was already on its way. At 7 o'clock sharp, Ashley appeared with her laptop, her face set in professional confidence. She had prepared spreadsheets, charts, even a slideshow about how we could manage our windfall. Marcus carried a bottle of wine, his expression practiced, conciliatory, ready to play the good son. I let them settle into the living room, let Ashley open her laptop with a flourish, let Marcus clear his throat as though he were about to deliver a speech. Then I placed David's folder on the coffee table between us. Ashley blinked. "What's this?" "Your financial life," I said calmly. "The one Harold investigated before he died." Marcus paled instantly. Ashley froze, her fingers hovering above the keyboard. I flipped open the folder, page by page, detailing their debts: $47,000 in credit cards, $32,000 on a mortgage underwater, $18,000 in car loans, Ashley's business, operating at a loss, their lives, balanced on lies and borrowed time. They stammered, protested, tried to twist the narrative, but I did not raise my voice. I laid out the facts. Every dollar, every hour of unpaid labor I had given them, every insult disguised as generosity. "Over the past year," I said evenly, "I have given you $15,000 in rent, 1,200 hours of free childcare, 800 loads of laundry, and 300 meals. In return, You gave me a room you planned to move to the basement. That is not family. That is exploitation. Ashley's composure cracked. Tears slid down her face, not of guilt but of exposure. Marcus shook his head like a boy caught in a lie he could not undo. Mom, it was never supposed to be like this. We just needed help. You needed help, I replied, and you disguised it as love. You bled me dry because you thought I was too old, too weak, too blind to notice. But Harold saw you. He left me a trust of $500,000 and now I have 53 million more. I am not trapped anymore. I do not need you anymore. I stood, the folder still open on the table, their lives laid bare in black and white. I am moving out. I have already put a deposit on a place of my own. From now on, you will face your debts without me. Ashley sobbed harder. Marcus pleaded, his voice breaking. But I walked to the door with my head high. Harold had been right. Justice delayed is not justice denied. And tonight justice had arrived, armed with numbers sharper than any blade. The night of the family meeting left me with a clarity I had not felt in years. For so long, I had lived in silence, swallowing my pride, convincing myself that endurance was strength. But now, with $53 million secured, and Harold's secret protection revealed, I realized endurance had only kept me imprisoned. Freedom meant action, and action could no longer wait. Ashley and Marcus had sat stunned in the living room, staring at the documents I spread before them. They tried to argue, but the facts were immovable. Their debts, their lies, their exploitation, it was all written in ink they could not erase. When I walked out of that house to the sound of Ashley's sobbing, I felt lighter than the snow swirling outside. For the first time in years, I belonged to myself. The next morning, the storm of reporters had not died down. Cameras lined the street, microphones thrust forward whenever I opened the door. But this time, I did not retreat. I stepped outside, my coat buttoned tight, my ticket secure in my wallet. Their questions rained down. What would I do with the money? Would I share it with my family? How did it feel to beat the odds? I paused at the end of the walkway, the cameras flashing. I am grateful for this blessing, I said, my voice strong enough to carry over the chaos, and I intend to use it to live independently, to make my own choices and to reclaim my dignity. For too long I have been treated like a burden. Today I am free. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Behind me I felt Ashley's sharp intake of breath from the doorway, Marcus's stunned silence. I turned back toward the cameras. Family should be about love and respect, not financial arrangements. I want anyone watching who has been taken advantage of to know this. It is never too late to stand up for yourself. The words struck like lightning. Reporters leaned closer, scribbling furiously, recording every syllable. The story shifted from a lottery win to something far larger, a reckoning. That evening, I drove to Meadowbrook Senior Community, the place I had chosen for my new beginning. The apartment was bright, with 2 bedrooms, a full kitchen, and sunlight streaming through wide windows. It was more than a place to live. It was proof that I could walk away from the cage they had built for me. The monthly fee was less than what I had been forced to pay Ashley and Marcus, and it came with something they could never provide: peace. As I signed the papers, I imagined Harold's voice. He had always said that justice was about timing. Sometimes it arrived late, but when it did, it was unstoppable. That night, I unpacked a few essentials, setting Harold's old driver's license on the dresser beside my ticket. For the first time in 2 years, I slept without fear of being summoned to cook, clean, or babysit. I slept like a woman who had reclaimed her life. But Marcus and Ashley were not done. The next morning they called repeatedly, their voices tight with panic. Marcus begged to talk. Ashley sent long messages filled with apologies, excuses, promises to change. They pleaded that family should not be broken apart over misunderstandings. They wanted me back under their roof, not out of love, but out of desperation. Without my monthly payments, their debts loomed over them like vultures. Without me, their facade was collapsing. I did not answer. Instead, I met with David again. He guided me through setting up a foundation, establishing trusts, ensuring that my money would outlast any storm. He never once treated me like a fragile old woman. He treated me as what I had always been: a capable adult, a woman with choices. That weekend, news spread further. Interviews replayed on television. Newspapers printed my words in bold headlines. Family should be about love, not exploitation. Strangers stopped me in the grocery store to thank me, some with tears in their eyes. Elderly women whispered their own stories of being used by children who saw them as burdens. Men shook my hand, calling me brave. I had not just claimed my money, I had claimed my voice. Marcus showed up at Meadowbrook 2 days later, his face drawn, his suit wrinkled. He stood in the lobby, shifting from foot to foot like a nervous boy. "Mom, please, can we talk?" His voice cracked under the weight of desperation. For a moment, I saw the child he had been, the one who used to press his small hand into mine and beg me never to let go. But that boy was gone, replaced by a man who had allowed greed to rot his soul. "We have nothing to discuss," I said evenly. "Your father warned me this might happen. He told me never to let anyone, not even family, use my kindness against me." He swallowed hard, his eyes glistening. "It was Ashley. She pushed me. I never meant for it to get this far." The excuse stung, not because it was convincing, but because it was cowardly. "You had a choice, Marcus. Every day you had a choice. And you chose silence while she treated me like property." His shoulders sagged, the fight draining out of him. "We're drowning in debt. Without you, we'll lose everything." I held his gaze, my voice steady. "Then you will learn the lesson you tried to teach me, how to survive without help, because I am done carrying you." He left with his head bowed, and I knew the weight of his choices was finally pressing down on him. That night, I sat by the window of my new apartment, watching the lights of Cedar Falls flicker in the distance. I thought about Harold, about the promise I had kept. I thought about the years I had lost to silence and fear. And I thought about the life I still had ahead of me, a life no longer defined by what others demanded of me. $53 million had given me freedom, but the real victory was realizing I had always deserved it. The money was justice, yes, but it was also something deeper. Proof that even at 67, even after loss, even after betrayal, I could begin again. As I closed the curtains, I whispered Harold's words into the quiet. "Justice delayed is not justice denied." And for the first time in years, I smiled without bitterness. There are moments in life when everything you thought you knew about love, loyalty, and family is shattered, and you are forced to look at the pieces scattered around you. For years, I believed that sacrifice was what made a mother valuable, that giving everything even when nothing was given back was the mark of strength. I told myself endurance was love, that silence was peace, and that one day my family would see me for the woman I was, not just the convenience I provided. But I was wrong. Endurance without respect is not love. Silence in the face of exploitation is not peace. It is surrender. When Harold died, I lost more than my husband. I lost the shield that had stood between me and the greed of the people who should have protected me. Marcus and Ashley filled that void with words coded in concern but sharpened with control. They took my money, my labor, and my dignity, packaging it all as family duty. I let it happen because grief had made me fragile. I told myself they meant well. I told myself this was temporary. But justice has a way of finding its path, even when it takes years. For me, it came in the form of a simple ticket. 6 numbers inked onto cheap paper that carried the weight of 32 years of faith. That slip of paper gave me more than wealth. It gave me a voice. It gave me back the power they thought they had stripped from me. And with that power, I did not seek revenge in cruelty. I sought freedom in truth. I told the world what they had done. I exposed the lies, the debts, the exploitation. I stood up, not just for myself, but for every person who has ever been told they are too old, too weak, too dependent to fight back. And in that moment, I realized something profound. You do not need $53 million to claim your dignity. You only need the courage to stop letting others define your worth. Money can buy houses, cars, vacations, but it cannot buy respect. Respect is earned, and it is defended. And when those closest to you fail to give it, you must have the strength to demand it for yourself. If you are listening to this, and you feel the weight of someone else's control pressing down on you, know this. It is never too late, whether you are 30 or 70. Whether you have millions or only your voice, you have the right to reclaim your life. You have the right to draw a line and say, this far, no further. My story is not about money. It is about justice, about survival, and about the courage to rise when others try to bury you. And if it resonates with you, if you believe in stories that uncover the hidden truths of human nature, then I invite you to stay with me. Subscribe to Silent Lies, where the masks come off and the real faces of betrayal, greed, and redemption are revealed. Because sometimes the lies we whisper in silence are the ones that destroy use, and the truth is the only weapon that can set us free.